Taken as a whole, the Monogatari series is, at its core, one big coming-of-age story. Now, I'd be surprised if that was author Nisho Ishin's intent from the very beginning, given his figure-it-out-as-you-go on a per-volume basis approach to developing the franchise, but it's definitely what the series had evolved into over the course of its run, and the climax of Owari Monogatari's Ogi Dark left zero room for doubt. Many fans point to second season as the major turning point for the series, as it took the daring leap of occasionally shifting its focus to individual, tightly focused character pieces, self-contained arcs that each had a clear trajectory and dovetailed back into the overarching narrative with a sense of closure and progression over the course of a single volume. While many hold Neko Monogatari White's Tsubasa Tiger as the exemplar with respect to this turning point, as it presents an emotionally resounding and vulnerable story of belonging, of accepting one's identity and place in the world, territory that had been hitherto unexplored in the series. I, instead, have a personal fondness for Hanamonogatari's Suruga Devil as holistically capturing the essence of accepting the follies and mistakes of one's fleeting youth, of grappling with the existential angst and the cornucopia of misgivings and regrets that comes with straddling the line between childhood and adulthood. Suruga Devil serves as the epilogue to Monogatari's lengthy and at times convoluted narrative, or at least the first chunk of it, taking place chronologically after the events of both Owari Monogatari's Ogi Dark and Zoku Owari Monogatari's Koyomi Reverse, and focuses on Suruga Kanbaru, as she struggles to cope with the path of uncertainty ahead of her, of the brave new world that is the upcoming school term, with everyone she cared about having now moved on and gone their separate ways. No matter how hard she tries, she can't quite bring herself to dip a toe into these uncharted waters, as it's the past that holds her hostage, quite literally in the form of her left arm, a constant reminder of her inability to escape her sins, to escape the rainy devil that is still very much a prominent and defining fixture of her identity. It's the physical manifestation of her heart's deepest desire, seen off the leash in Koyomi Reverse's mirror world. Thus, she remains trapped in an agonizingly directionless routine, going on long jogs up and down the slopes and across the sprawling vistas of her backwater town for hours, as if chasing after time itself, but never actually closing the distance. Heck, she probably doesn't even know which temporal construct she's chasing. Is she racing to reclaim the halcyon days of the past, or trying to grasp her uncertain future? She may not know the answer to that question, but what she does know is that both of these are slipping further and further out of her reach as the days drag on. As the arc unfolds, it quickly becomes apparent that this is not only a metaphor for Kanbaru's current stasis, but her entire life up until this point. At the same time she runs towards that indefinable something, she's simultaneously running away from the demons that are truly haunting her and keeping her trapped in limbo. Every time she's tried to confront her problems head-on, the end result has been unmitigated disaster, bringing ruin to everyone around her, so her counter-tactic has been to simply bottle up her frustrations and let the passage of time smooth things over, something that is made clear in her first confrontation with the arc's central antagonist and Kanbaru's foil, her former basketball rival, Roka Numachi. Numachi is certainly no stranger to letting time do all the heavy lifting, having made a career out of it, having saved scores of sufferers, putting forth her services as a one-way therapist, doing nothing more than lending an empathetic ear to their myriad of tribulations. Eventually, Kanbaru comes to encounter Deishu Kaiki, who, through his uncharacteristic gesture of generosity, teaches her one of the central tenets of the arc, that nothing in this world can be partitioned into black and white, that even vile conmen like himself can offer kindness towards those whom he considers worthy of his admittedly limited compassion, thus reinforcing the contradictory nature of Numachi's chosen title of Lord Devil, in other words, a devil who is paradoxically venerated as a savior. As Kanbaru learns of Numachi's role in liberating her from the grasp of the rainy devil, however, it becomes clear that the lesson imparted by Kaiki was merely a quaint appetizer, a warm-up for the existential and moralistic quagmire that she will have to escape as part of the arc's central conflict. In Kanbaru's second confrontation with Numachi, she learns the origins of Lord Devil, how it was born from a girl seeking out Numachi, that is, specifically seeking out the person who had fallen the furthest from grace, someone who could be beneath no one in terms of being pitied. But the girl was wrong, for Numachi did pity her, and with arguably sadistic pleasure. But as Numachi listened attentively, as she lent a shoulder to cry on, she curiously found that not only did she feel better, but Miraculously, so did the girl. This is, of course, in stark contrast to Kanbaru, who has been forced to diligently repress the most genuine parts of her soul for fear of unleashing the wrath of the rainy devil onto others, as she had done in the past to her former classmates and to Araragi. Numachi, on the other hand, is revered for her self-serving schadenfreude. That is, her personal fulfillment comes directly from the misery she siphons from others, somehow managing to flip the hopeless tragedy of her situation into a non-zero-sum game, landing squarely on the solution that is Pareto optimal, as Numachi refers to it in game theoretic terms. That is, an equilibrium where there is mutual benefit for both parties, the solution where one side need not lose for the other side to win. Far from the image of a sickly, powerless cripple that she outwardly presents, she is someone who, to Kanbaru, is in full control of her life. Or, more accurately, her afterlife, as the truth eventually comes to light that Numachi is nothing more than a spirit cursed to roam the earth, collecting misery wherever she goes. Unbeknownst to her, she is deadlocked in a purgatorial delusion, existing as an oddity, more accurately, an oddity even among oddities, as her prescribed directive, her newfound raison d'être, all but ensures that the longer she lingers among the living, the better a place the world becomes. Having recounted her story to Kanbaru, Numachi proceeds to set out on her journey to locate the remaining devil parts, leaving Kanbaru at even more of a complete loss as to how to proceed, and even more fundamentally, how to feel, something that comes as a shock to her. After all, she has been liberated, with the accursed arm now under the care of a much more capable steward. Not only that, Lord Devil turned out to be every bit the Good Samaritan as the reputation which preceded her, and Numachi is now skipping town for parts unknown, cutting all ties with Kanbaru, allowing her to return to her status quo with nary a disturbance. Just like with all of Lord Devil's clients, it's a clear win-win situation for everyone involved. But in contrast to how things were before, Kanbaru's restless anxiety suddenly reaches a fever pitch in the wake of Numachi's imminent departure, boiling over to the point where she can't even fall asleep. And so she goes on a 10-hour run to try to figure out why she just can't, for the life of her, leave well enough alone. And that's when, in an exhaustion-induced stupor, she encounters Araragi. I want to point out a critical difference between the novel and the anime adaptation concerning their subsequent therapeutic and vulnerable conversation, which has to do with how Kanbaru describes her dilemma to her senpai. In the anime, she says,
でもこのまま放っておくのが一番いいということがなんとなくわかるんだ。誰も困っていないからだ。どんな不幸な状況にあっても、そいつが平気な顔をしているなら手を出すべきじゃないだろう。
But in the novel, she continues with, and as it stands, many people are even being helped. If a lot of people are being saved by a situation that I want to do something about, and not a single person is suffering, it can't possibly be okay for me to stick my nose in for my own selfish reasons. This is an important piece of omitted dialogue, because it underscores the indisputable charitability of Numachi's undertaking, regardless of its disingenuous undertones, and confirms that Kanbaru is very much aware that by putting it into Numachi, she's leaving Lord Devil's clientele high and dry, robbing them of a source of much-needed consolation and comfort in times of desperation. One counter-argument she poses is that, in spite of this, by stopping Numachi, she's saving her from being overtaken by the devil, making an omelet by breaking a few eggs, as it were. But that's also not quite accurate, as both she and Numachi agree that the devil would hold no sway over Numachi's mental and spiritual fortifications. There's nothing for him to take, no sinful desire to exploit. And even if something did go horribly wrong with Numachi's plan, someone like Oshino or Izuko would step in and put a stop to things before they got out of hand. And so her intervention would be neither requested nor required, even in the absolute worst-case scenario. So truly, this is a very lopsided decision for Kanbaru, one that has a seemingly clear-cut answer. Many lives are being saved. Heck, by encountering Numachi, even she herself came to be freed from the oddity that plagued her, that she had no way of curing on her own. And with no one being harmed, why not just leave things as they are? Why now, after all this, is she still leaning towards pulling the plug? For what reason? The answer is, of course, to put it simply, for her own sake. At the end of the day, Numachi is, and has always been, her rival, and what Kanbaru needs to feel complete, to quell the anxiety in her soul, to break free from the cycle of stagnation, is the satisfaction of finally, personally, besting Numachi, not saving her, not helping her move on. Any altruistic outcome is merely collateral, nothing more. But this is exactly why Suruga Devil succeeds as an authentic coming-of-age journey, because it's about Kanbaru finally letting go of her inhibitions, finally refusing, for once, to put everyone else's happiness in front of her own. She makes it crystal clear as she faces Numachi on the court one last time as to why she's doing it, because she loathes looking at Numachi, and later elaborates on those searing words. The sight of Numachi makes her envious. Numachi is what Kanbaru would have been if only she were a better person. Numachi had endured so much more hardship than Kanbaru, but had come out the other side stronger, both a martyr and a hero, someone who found life-affirming gratification in bearing the misery of others, instead of being torn apart by it. Someone who managed to bend the devil to her will, instead of being consumed by it. Why couldn't I be that strong, Kanbaru asks herself. If not my own limitations, what was stopping me from rising above the situation like she did? And so, she makes her final decision. Instead of running away like she's always done, and allowing Numachi to walk away, holding an unblemished record of victory over her, she embraces the rainy devil that sleeps inside her, inside all of us, and so becomes the poison instead of the cure, challenging Numachi to one final game of basketball, to thoroughly crush the idealized version of herself that makes her own existence feel so inadequate and insignificant in comparison. But in finally besting her rival, against all odds, Kanbaru's self-serving actions do in fact yield an altruistic outcome, as, in defeat, Numachi's soul is liberated, able to finally pass on to the afterlife. In the conversation between Kanbaru and Araragi that closes out the arc, and the first part of the Monogatari saga along with it, Araragi expresses that, in the end, no one will ever be able to judge if what Kanbaru did was right, either her decision or her actions. There's a part of her that believes that maybe, just maybe, somewhere deep inside Numachi, the muffled cry of her soul could be heard, aching to move on. After all, when face to face with Kanbaru, Numachi bears the most vulnerable parts of her soul openly and without hesitation, in a way not so different from how she herself handled Lord Devil's countless clients. By confronting Kanbaru, the savior may have subconsciously become the savee, regarding Kanbaru as the one who lords over the Lord Devil, and silently begging her for her hand in escaping this purgatory. But because Numachi left so abruptly without having the chance to confirm or deny, there's no way of knowing for sure. But that's the point, that all of this is part of growing up, making mistakes, reflecting on them, and moving past them, instead of remaining permanently mired in indecision. As Ogi puts it,
いいんじゃないですか、勘違いもたまには。たった一度の過ちも許されないというのでは、人生は窮屈すぎます。
Hanamonogatari's Suruga Devil is the story of Kanbaru slowly acknowledging that the world isn't clean-cut. It's messy, it's disheveled, and it doesn't follow a predictable pattern, in a manner not dissimilar to the default arrangement of her bedroom. Sometimes a selfless act carried out by one person is met with contempt and punishment, whereas a selfish blunder carried out by another is lauded and celebrated. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much her late mother willed it to be, people like herself, like Kaiki, like Numachi, simply can't be binned as all heroic or all villainous, as devils or saviors, as medicine or poison. This is the very methodology behind how life is designed and architected. It's an unwieldy, constantly mutating patchwork of contradictions that can only be spontaneously untangled as you go along. And once Kanbaru embraces that truth, she learns that it's okay to live for your own sake, without being shackled by regret, by the fear and doubt of getting it wrong, or by the confusion of things not making sense. Because, to put it simply, we are all more than the sum of our mistakes. She's able to shed her insecurities, the last vestiges of her adolescence, and finally move forward, living in accordance with her own values instead of leaning on anyone else's, walking the path that is now unfolded ahead of her with a fresh outlook and renewed determination. As Araragi puts it in his final words, what you did wasn't right, and it wasn't wrong. It was merely your youth.